This is a short video on how to maintain your leisure battery. Let's just talk about battery performance and amp hour ratings. Now, the stated capacity of a battery is expressed in amp hours, but the quoted figure is only applicable when the ambient temperature is 25 degrees Celsius. Now, in reality, there are many occasions in the UK when it's much colder than this, and for every 1 degree drop in temperature, there's an approximate 1% reduction in its amp hour capacity. Now let's just take as an example, if you were using a battery which was nominally rated at 60 amp hours, and it was now, let's say it was operating in a temperature of 15 degrees Celsius, this 10 degree reduction in temperature would bring about a 10% reduction in its capacity, meaning that it's now effectively performing as a 54 amp hour battery. Let's move on to checking the electrolyte levels and charging the battery. Okay, one thing to bear in mind is the more you use the battery, obviously the more you're going to charge it, so the more you need to check the water levels. So let's start by doing that now, and we'll remove these 6 caps. Well, that first one was fine, so we'll move on to the next 5. Don't forget, when you do need to top up, always use deionized water or distilled water. Remember that the plates only have to barely be covered with the water. The plates are obviously there in segments. The plates usually come to about 1 inch below the top of the battery there. So if you get a torch, just shine them into the apertures there. You should be able to see clearly. One of the best bits of advice I can give is for you to get yourself one of these 3-stage intelligent battery chargers. They're relatively cheap. I think you can get them for around £45. They'll give you good longevity out of your battery and good performance. So let's see how they work. Stage 1 is typically where the highest voltage and amperage the charger is rated for will actually be used. The level of the charge can be applied without overheating the battery. This is known as the battery's natural absorption rate. For a typical 12 volt battery, the charging voltage going into a battery will reach 14.6 to 14.8 volts, while flooded batteries can be even higher. For the gel battery, the voltage should be no more than 14.2 to 14.3 volts. If the charger is a 10 amp charger, and if the battery resistance allows it, the charger will put out a full 10 amps. This stage will recharge batteries that are severely drained. There's no risk of overcharging at this stage because the battery hasn't even reached full yet. At stage 2, the charger will detect the voltage and resistance from the battery prior to charging. After reading the battery, the charger determines which stage to properly charge it at. Once the battery has reached 80% state of charge, the charger will then enter the absorption stage. At this point, most chargers will maintain a steady voltage while the amperage declines. The lower current going into the battery safely brings up the charge on the battery without overheating it. This stage takes more time. For instance, the last remaining 20% of the battery takes much longer when compared to the first 20% during the bulk stage. The current continuously declines until the battery almost reaches full capacity. On to stage 3. Some chargers enter float mode as early as 85% state of charge, but others begin closer to 95%. Either way, the float stage brings the battery all the way through and maintains the 100% state of charge. The voltage will taper down and maintain a steady 13.2 to 13.4 volts, which is the maximum voltage a 12 volt battery can hold. The current will also decrease to a point where it's considered a trickle. That's where the term trickle charger comes from. It's essentially the float stage where there is a charge going into the battery at all times, but only a safe rate to ensure a full state of charge and nothing more. Most smart chargers do not turn off at this point, yet it is completely safe to leave a battery in float mode for months or even years at a time. Okay, so we've discussed charging the battery. Let's move on to storing the battery and general maintenance. If you decide to remove your battery from your unit, whether it be a caravan, a motorhome or boat, try not to store the battery on a concrete floor, as this is one surefire way to render your battery pretty much useless in a matter of months. Instead, try to store it above the ground on a wooden bench like I've done with this one, and never leave the battery in a discharged state. Always check that the battery is 100% charged before unplugging the charger from the wall, and then periodically check the battery every couple of weeks just in case it needs a recharge. I mentioned earlier, when storing the battery, always try to store it at 100% charged state. The reason for this is there's a process called sulfation. Here's the slide. Just bear in mind that the manufacturers of these batteries generally only claim that you receive around about 100 deep cycle charges. Now a deep cycle charge, as I mentioned earlier, is at a 50% state of charge. So if you let the battery go any lower than this, the fewer deep cycles that you'll actually get from the unit. Okay, I'm pretty sure we've covered most things, but if you find you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to leave them in the comment box below. Thanks for watching the video. I shall upload a new one soon. Thank you.